You know Kepler and Hubble and Halley and Newton, Hawking and Tyson and Einstein and Sagan. But do you recall the most famous starman of all?
Yes, it's the 1500s again. Can you tell I took a European history class? Only this time we're going to forgo the usual exploits of kingly politics and who's getting beheaded by who, cause who said what. No, we're going to take a closer look at the finer points of life. So take a deep breath and get ready to explore the history of the search for truth. And as any aspiring scientist knows, that quest involves data charts. So many data charts.
Tycho Brahe was a bright-eyed little boy born in Knutstorp, Borgia. He was the eldest son. Well, actually, he had a twin brother, but he died before he was baptized, so his name never made it onto Wikipedia. Of Bit and Otto Brahe. A noble family who loved him so much that they let his uncle kidnap him when he was 2 years old, presumably because his father lost a fiddling contest. Run, boys, run. He probably also thought twins was cheating.
The next 18 years of Tycho's life were completely unremarkable.
But then Daddy Uncle died, Tycho went to the U of Rostock and got his nose chopped off in a duel over math. God, you just don't see that same kind of passion in kids today. He ended up replacing it with a maybe silver or gold, probably just brass prosthetic, which he had to constantly readjust and hold in place with glue. At that point, I think you ought to just embrace the gaping hole in your face. Skipping a couple more boring years, Tycho went on to become a scientist, in spite of poor dead Daddy Uncle's wishes. He hopped around a bit, taking on an honorary idol position here, receiving an observatory laboratory there, basically couch surfing for the 1%. Eventually, he settled down, got himself a castle observatory, and a nice commoner pseudo-wife he could never marry. So sad. And got to serious business. Now, Brahe doesn't get all the same credit as a bunch of astronomers because he never really figured out the way the universe worked exactly. He did write a respectable and probably very dull book about a mysterious new star that popped into existence in 72 and how it had to be behind the moon because of parallax and excuse me, sorry. But he never bought into the whole Earth revolving around the sun theory. In fact, he made his own model of the universe to compromise in which every other planet in the solar system revolved around the sun except the Earth, because even though he admitted Copernicus's model was totally correct mathematically, the Earth was just too heavy and lazy to move. Kind of like, no, do not reach for the low-hanging fruit. Point is, we're special, damn it. While he may not have had the distinction of discovering anything super significant like other astronomers of the Renaissance, he was nevertheless really important. As awesome as the internet makes science out to be, science has a terrible dark side. It's f***ing boring as hell sometimes. But that didn't stop Tycho, oh no! He devoted his life to making an enormity of tiny, accurate measurements of the movements of the moon and stars and... Sorry, moving on to the good stuff. Uraniborg is where the real action happens. Apparently, controlling 1% of the wealth of Denmark gets boring after a while, so Tycho decided to hire a little man named Jep, here represented by Peter Dinklage, because who doesn't love Peter Dinklage? Jep was the appointed court jester who would spend dinner sitting underneath the table. Tycho thought he had psychic powers. And for when a psychic dwarf wasn't enough to keep him entertained, there was his favorite drinking buddy, the elk. Yes, Tycho was in the habit of keeping a tamed elk in his household for a while until one sad day when Mr. Elk, unmoved by several attempted interventions, had one too many beers, fell down a flight of stairs and died at someone else's house. I'm not kidding. There's documented proof for this. I just like to think of the awkward phone call that must have taken place when the nobleman entertaining the elk had to call Tycho and tell him what happened. Even better would be the phone call after Tycho himself died. Well, actually, that would be kind of somber and a real moment of introspection for everyone.
But yeah, we put everything worth mentioning of this man's life into 4 minutes, and now it's time to move on.
So like any good death, there are a number of possibilities. The first, and most hilarious, is that his bladder gave out after another party when he didn't deem it appropriate to excuse himself. Ain't no party like a Brahe party. The other is that Tycho is brutally poisoned to death by his aspiring young assistant who is never allowed on the good furniture, Johann Kepler. Yes, that Johann
Kepler and Hubble.
There's reason to believe this too, since Kepler, in his own words, quickly took advantage of the absence by taking the observations under my care, or perhaps usurping them.
Kepler! Or it's possible the king didn't like Tycho betting his mom.
Tycho, the false nose star man, had a very shiny nose. And if you ever saw it, you'd probably say it's pretty gross. Yeah, that's as far as I'm going.